Hey SAT students, this guy from pengprep.com. If you haven't already, please go watch my videos on leveling strategies first before watching this one. It's really important that you know those because I'll be building off of those concepts. Now, let's begin video 1 of non-essential clauses. Non-essential clauses are groups of words that are literally non-essential. They can be removed from a sentence while keeping the sentence grammatically correct. For example, the penguin which flew into the air landed on a building. Here, the non-essential clause is which flew into the air, because even if we remove it, what's remaining is the penguin landed on a building, and this is still grammatically correct. On the other hand, landed on a building is not a non-essential clause. It's because if we remove it, we are left with the penguin which flew into the air. Now this only has a subject and no verb, which makes it a non. And since a non can't stand alone, it makes the sentence grammatically incorrect. Let's try another one. Hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest, the lost city remained untouched by modern civilization. The non-essential clause here is hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest because even if we remove it, we are still left with something that's grammatically correct, like the lost city remained untouched by modern civilization. One last example. The engineering team finally launched a fix which instantly repaired the login glitch for millions of users. The non-essential clause here is going to be which all the way to users because even if we remove it, we have a grammatically valid sentence. The engineering team finally launched the fix. I think you can see the pattern now. A non-essential clause will describe, define, or provide more detail about something in a sentence. Which flew into the air provided more details about the penguin. Hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest provided more details about the lost city. Now, I want you to pause the video and try it yourself. Try and spot the non-essential clauses in the following examples. Not too bad, right? Now we're going to learn about the punctuation rules for non-essential clauses. When a non-essential clause is placed at the beginning of a sentence, it's going to be immediately followed by either a comma or a dash. For example, decorated with hundreds of edible gold flakes, the wedding cake took the chef over 3 hours to craft. Here, the non-essential clause is from decorated to flakes, so we need to place either a comma or a dash immediately after it. When a non-essential clause is in the middle, we either need to surround them by commas, dashes, or parentheses. For example, the wedding cake decorated with hundreds of edible gold flakes took the chef over 3 hours to craft. Here, the non-essential clause is from decorated to flakes, so we either surround them with commas, dashes, or parentheses. Now it's important to note that commas, dashes, and parentheses can't be mixed together when the non-essential clause is placed in the middle. So you can't have a comma at the beginning and a dash at the end. It either needs to be a comma, comma, dash, dash, or parentheses, parentheses. When a non-essential clause is at the end of a sentence, you either need to have a comma or a dash before the clause or surround the clause with parentheses. For example, the chef spent over 3 hours crafting the wedding cake, which was decorated with hundreds of edible gold flakes. Here, the non-essential clause is from which to flakes. So you can either place a comma before it, a dash before it, or surround that last piece with 2 parentheses. Now let's look at an example problem. I want you to pause the video, read it first, and then listen to my explanation. Are you done? Let's dive in. The non-essential clause here is from reclassified to definitions. We know this because even if we remove it, we are left with a grammatically correct sentence which has a subject, Pluto, and the verb still orbits. Now, the non-essential clause is in the middle of a sentence, and so it can either be surrounded by commas, dashes, or parentheses. But we already see that there is a dash in the beginning. So to complete the rule, this means that there needs to be a dash at the end, because I told you that these commas, dashes, and parentheses can't be mixed up. So the correct answer is going to be A. Now pause the video and try the next 2 problems yourself. Use the rules that we learned. For the first problem, the non-essential clause is from an instrument to from their undersides. And this non-essential clause is in the middle of a sentence, meaning that we need to surround it with 2 commas, 2 dashes, or 2 parentheses. Now, we see that the beginning of the non-essential clause already has a comma. So to complete it, we need to place another comma at the end. This means the correct answer is B. For the second problem, the non-essential clause is from having trained to turning to poetry. And since the non-essential clause is placed at the beginning of a sentence, it needs to be followed with a comma or a dash. This means the correct answer choice is A. Great, now let's learn about an exception. In the example, the penguin that went to the market bought a lot of lettuce. We can remove the phrase that went to the market while keeping the sentence grammatically correct. So you could think that this is a non-essential clause and you may consider surrounding it with 2 commas or 2 dashes. But in fact, you should not do this. The reason is because the word that is just very special. It's used to introduce what's called an essential clause, not a non-essential clause. Now, it's not important for you to know the details behind what an essential clause is, but one thing you should remember is this. Whatever comes with the word that, it's never going to be a non-essential clause, even if you can remove it while keeping the sentence grammatically correct. This means that we cannot apply the punctuation rules for non-essential clauses onto clauses that begin with the word that. For example, the following sentence is perfectly grammatical. The ancient routes that connected Europe and Asia allowed for the rapid exchange of both goods and cultural ideas. Even if we can remove the phrase that connected Europe and Asia while keeping the sentence grammatically correct, we do not consider it to be a non-essential clause. Again, the reason is because the word that is just an exception. On the other hand, if we placed which instead of that, then which connected Europe and Asia will be a non-essential clause. So we need to follow the punctuation rule for non-essential clauses and place 2 commas, 2 dashes, or parentheses around it. Here's one more example. The specialized enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates in the stomach function best in highly acidic environments. Even if we can remove the phrase that break down complex carbohydrates in the stomach, we don't consider it to be a non-essential clause, and therefore we don't put punctuation around it. But again, if we replace this word that with something like which, we do need to place punctuations around the non-essential clause. Now, there's an exception to the exception. That is, there are cases where you can place a comma next to the word that. For example, the company that, despite its poor forecast, moved the world suddenly collapsed. Here, there are 2 things that the company is being referred to. First, that it moved the world. Second, that it had poor forecasts. The first clause, that moved the world, is safely removable, but it's not a non-essential clause because we have the word that. So there's no punctuation placed near it. But for the second one, it is a non-essential clause because we can remove it safely from the sentence, and there's no word that in the beginning. So because the second one is a non-essential clause, we need to follow the rule for non-essential clauses and place 2 commas, one at the beginning and the other at the end. And as a result, a comma naturally gets placed next to the word that. So although there should be no punctuation next to the word that normally, there's an exception when the non-essential clause is immediately next to the word that. Because we need to properly punctuate for the non-essential clause, we sort of force the punctuation to be next to the word that. Let's look at one more example. The app that revolutionized modern communication was created by 2 teenagers. This is normal. There's no punctuation next to the word that. But if you change this to, the app that, without a doubt, revolutionized modern communication was created by 2 teenagers, there's a non-essential clause right next to the word that, so in the process of properly punctuating it, you inevitably place a comma next to the word that. So summing up, you cannot place a comma next to the word that unless there is a non-essential clause right next to it. Now it's time for you to try it yourself. Punctuate the following sentences properly, and if they're already correct, then leave them as they are. Great, now let's just try 2 more problems. For the first problem, I see the word that, and I immediately think there should be no punctuation next to it. So C seems like the likely answer. However, I need to check whether this problem handles an exception, whether there is a non-essential clause directly next to the word that. Now I read the passage again, but there's no non-essential clause right next to that. So the correct answer is C. For the second problem, I see the word that again, but this time I see a non-essential clause immediately next to it. The non-essential clause is verified by hand by NASA mathematician Katherine Johnson. And because this is a non-essential clause that's in the middle of a sentence, we need to place 2 commas, 2 dashes, or 2 parentheses around it. Here I see the 2 comma version is the only one that's available because there's already a comma placed at the beginning of that clause. So the correct answer is going to be B. Great job. That covered the basics of non-essential clauses. Like always, the practice problems and notes for this lesson are uploaded on penguinprep.com with the link in the description below. The next video will cover more advanced cases on non-essential clauses like nested and sequential non-essential clauses. I'll see you then.